Welcome to another edition of The Conversation here at the Dakotan. I am Jonathan Starr. Today I'm joined by Lisa Hermosillo. Thanks for joining us, Lisa.
Thank you, John, for having me. It's always fun.
Absolutely. All right, so today we have an interesting topic to dive into. This comes off of the heels of something that Minot does. They do these legislative forums, which is really fantastic. And this year been pretty well done. Sadly, I haven't been at as many as I'd like. But there was something specific that popped up at the last legislative forum that really stood out to you. And so kind of walk us through what kind of happened there.
Sure. Well, we had one person. So if you've been to forums, we know how structured they are and how they are to be conducted. So there's guidelines and rules to how these are done. And what you do is you fill out a piece of paper. If you have the bill number, great. And then you want to make sure that you have whichever representatives that would know about it or either sponsored it or introduced it to answer any questions you have. But one person had brought up the Future Caucus, which was created in Bismarck. There was 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans that got together to make this happen. And Rep. Macy Belinsky from District 40 was the first one to answer about it and to talk about it. And I thought she did a great job sharing her opinions on it and expressing how beneficial that this caucus would be and how it's really needed in such a polarized political environment that we're in right now. And after she was done talking, Rep. Dan Ruby from District 38 got up and shared his remarks. And Senator Jose Castaneda went shortly after he did. And between all 3 of those speeches, I thought they did such an amazing job providing a message that we all needed to hear. And that was, even though we have our political views that are different, we still get along. And they were talking about how they appreciate the relationships that they have with their Democrat colleagues. And by the end of it, you could just feel in the room, everyone just kind of felt like that refreshed because it was positive, it was encouraging. And then Rep. Jeff Hoverson from District 3 gets up, and within about 10 seconds of him talking, we all knew where he was going with this, and it was a rabbit hole that didn't need to happen. And what he got up to say was that the divide in North Dakota is happening because of extreme Democrats who are pushing LGBTQ and trans agendas. And he just, again, with how these forums are put together, everyone has an understanding that this was not a place, and they outline this at every forum, that it's not a place to voice your political views or your opinions. You need to stick to the bill at hand or the question at hand. And I thought it was very disrespectful, number one, because he was making these comments with the table of Democrats right behind him. So he wasn't even facing them when he was making these comments. And he was not supposed to do that. And I don't care if you're a legislator or the constituent. We have all been very respectful through all 6 of these forums. Right. Everyone followed those rules. And I was very disappointed to see him take an opportunity like he did to do that. I think if he went to his personal Facebook page and said what he did, everyone would probably move on with their lives.
Yeah.
And, but.
Right. And so just to make sure that that's clear. So basically, It's not that you have a problem and we'll address the statements that are made, because that's a separate topic. It was simply the place that it happened at. It's a place where there's respect. We've been there before. There's pieces of paper. People that show up can write down their question. That's the only way they can interact with the legislature. They don't get to stand up and be like, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? Right. It's very moderated, so that way it can be a controlled environment and hopefully very productive conversation happen.
Yes.
If you have a very controversial bill that gets asked about, which there was some early on in the legislature that maybe were asked at these forums, then maybe you're going to have some of those more pointed statements. But generally, when we're talking about property tax, it's not a left versus right, the philosophical part of Democrats versus Republicans. That's just property taxes, right? So basically it went outside of the scope of that into this other area that is fine. It just shouldn't have happened at that forum is basically what you're saying.
Correct. And what makes it hard for constituents too is because we've been so respectful about it that we've had to kind of sit through things that, maybe we didn't agree with, but we just know, hey, this is not the time and place.
Right.
And at a different time, I can contact my legislators and say, can you elaborate on this? Or can you talk to me about this? And I just felt like I don't know if it was that he just couldn't handle listening to his colleagues talk nicely about Democrats or talk about the great relationships that they do have. And so many people admired and respected them for doing that. And it was just a moment that was just drained in seconds of his comments.
Yeah, we noticed that stood out because I that's something that had been on your mind through your Facebook page where you took to that platform to kind of talk about that. Do you want to dive into that a little bit? Like what was said?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, all right.
Well, we all have our opinions when it comes to the LGBTQ and trans topics. And it is a very touchy one, but I feel like, yes, it wasn't how I wanted to talk about it, but I feel like things happen for a reason. And maybe this was just that stepping stone that I needed to address it. But it's not so much what he said. It's like we had talked about, it was how he did it. And I feel like if that's how he feels, there's ways to talk about that in a way that's respectful. Mm-hmm. But I also believe that this has been something that Democrats and at the national level and local level that we've kind of brushed aside. It's kind of that taboo topic. We don't want to maybe step outside of the aligning with the DNC or what the majority of Democrats or what people think Democrats align with. And I feel like it's time to have that conversation. It's time to talk about how I do believe that this is an area where maybe things have gone a little too far.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and so let's dive into that. Let's dive into a couple of issues. Let's start with, you already mentioned LGBTQ. So basically what it feels like the Republicans have done it some too. The Democrats, at least in North Dakota, have done it. It feels heavily where these social issues become the primary issue of the party rather than it being a secondary issue where, we're going to fight for those, but we understand that you're we are a state that's built on energy, built on ag, right? We know that you're a farmer and we know that the farm bill, we heard a ton about that to the point where I was getting, annoyed by, okay, I get we're a farm state, but all I hear about is this farm bill, right?
Right.
That was something, and that was coming from the Republican senators and representatives. But it seems like on the Democrat side that some of these social issues have become the primary thing that they're, and is that something where you're a Democrat? Is that something where how you stand? And let's be clear, or actually, let's just go with that. You're a Democrat. How do you feel about that? Is that something that should be the primary issues of the Democratic Party?
I do not. I have spent several months now traveling across North Dakota to our reorgs, and I've had a lot of Democrats talk about this, saying we feel like we've been abandoned, whether that's because they're on the western side of the state or because they just feel like we've taken one population and we have made it our mark. And so we have farmers, we have our military, we've got tribal nations, we have so many other populations that look at the Democrat Party and think, well, where's my voice in this? Okay. Where are you guys, going to the bat for us? And we do. We fight at the legislature, right? We see the bills that go through, but it's different. Like for one instance, if you go to our state website and you go to our merchandise store, and I know that since then they've been working on revamping that and putting new merchandise in there. But at one point, you have 38 items there and you have one, like a link, like a drop down menu, and it was just pride. Okay. And I think, okay, so how does this resonate and what message does that send to people when they go to our website and go to our events when they feel like it's really just like a one topic that they have taken, and I think we're losing people because either going to the independent side of things or just not voting at all.
Okay.
And so we kind of need to get back to the people that we've lost over the years. And I do believe that if we would maybe step back a little bit and take to heart what North Dakotans are truly saying that really matters to them, I think we'd see a different turnout in elections, and I think we would gain more support. But until we're willing to have this challenging conversation, I think we're gonna stay in this rut that we're in right now. And it's not to say, and I just, as a disclaimer and for the record, I am running for vice chair of the state party,
Right.
and my opinions right now are expressed are solely mine. I don't want to speak on behalf of the party or Adam. I do want to make sure I put that in there, but
Right.
I just feel like it's time for someone to speak up about this and to see where certain topics are hurting us, and how do we support and advocate for populations without excluding and making other people feel like they're excluded.
Right. So what do you feel? You've went to a ton of reorg meetings.
Yep.
I don't know how you survive sometimes because it seems like you're always on the road driving. As you've gone to those meetings, what are some of the key cornerstone topics that you hear coming from actual residents and actual constituents that should be potentially that they want to have heard more, have to be more a part of the core of the Democratic Party?
I would say one is coal and oil. So when you're out in the western side of North Dakota, there are people that feel like that's also another topic that they can't speak about because they feel like if I say I'm pro coal or pro oil, then I've gone against what the party platform is, and I might be kind of outed for that. But you know, when you're talking about topics that are so like the bigger like oil and coal, ag are one of the biggest things that make North Dakota.
Right.
And I think if we're going out a little too strong against and opposing that, I don't feel like that's really, and that's where I had one person out in District 2 mention this, that, you know, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot when we're going against what makes North Dakota and brings in so much revenue. And it's part of the workforce too. So people don't like to feel like they're not being supported in the work that they do. But, and then also you've got some of your topics that have gone through school stuff, students, lunches, focusing on healthcare has been a major one. And they just feel like we don't really address things until things are happening at the legislature level. And then of course, ag is another big one as well. Yeah.
Right. So you have those. And one of the, of course, key things a part of the Democratic Party that has been for years, a cornerstone has been unions, which ties directly into maybe not farmers, but it ties a little bit into energy industry, ties a little bit into the coal industry, ties into those industries and at least the components of those industries for sure. And so it seems like almost that group, and I think nationally, and I don't want to go into the national subject like full on because it's so broad and we could be here for hours talking about that. But it felt like nationally that there was a little bit of alienation, perhaps a tinge towards those group of people that was starting to be felt. And so I can only imagine what it would be like locally, where overall North Dakotans, probably if we all got in the same room, we're probably not as diverse as we make ourselves out to be.
Right.
There's going to be some social issues that we disagree on, but we're all going to be waking up, working hard, going, there's a lot of core values that are very consistent through a North Dakotan, right?
Absolutely.
So it seems like that group has been alienated as well. Have you had any feedback on that, or am I just kind of like out in the field?
No, and I that is one, and that was another one where I was trying to talk about with like the merchandise. We don't have anything that people from all these different professions have something to go and purchase, and they just feel like, again, it's a representation thing. But I know in Minot, the union thing has really kind of grown exponentially, like the support and the trying to regroup and trying to get their name out there and garner more support as well. So that's definitely one of them.
I want to say something about the merchandise because some people would go with the argument, well, you know, nobody's going to actually buy it anyways, blah, 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 blah. But what it does is, for better or for worse, it reflects and this is the point that you've been making, I believe, that I've been hearing you make, it reflects the values. Like so this is who we want to buy our product. Right. We want people that this is where our value is. This is where our focus is. And that's the overall conversation that we're having right now. It's not about the unions, not about those things play into it, but the actual focus of all this stuff is, and it feels a little bit alienating to some. Okay. So let's go. So what's the fix? We talk about LGBT. There's a couple other topics that are these divisive topics that divide the Republican Party. And then obviously it's going to divide across party lines. What's the fix for this LGBT? I don't know if it's an issue, that might be too strong, but this perspective that's being given right now by the focus that's been given by the Democratic Party right now. What's the fix to kind of resolve this? How do they fix this?
I think just having the conversation, number one. There are Democrats that are kind of afraid to come forward and mention the same thing. And we need to remember that, and I use this analogy a lot, and it might sound kind of weird, but there are going to be different shades of Democrats, just like there are different shades of Republicans. And I think what has happened is that we have taken, and the Republican Party is guilty of it too. We've got like your main topics and values that they stand by. But then as soon as you don't align 100%, or they feel like you've kind of like gone astray, I guess, we are so quick to out people. And what I had put in my post yesterday was that it's not really the topics or our opinions that cause the divide. It's literally how we treat each other and other people for having different views. Yeah, and we have got to get back to a point where we can remember that we all are entitled to our views. And there can be Democrats that feel like maybe the LGBTQ topic has gone too far, and that's okay. They have those feelings for a reason, and we just need people willing to seek them out and talk to them and have that conversation. It's not to say we can't support them, and I'm not in any shape, way, or form saying that we shouldn't. Right. I don't want anyone to...
That's a point that I was going to bring up next, actually, was as we go and we say this isn't something where you are saying that these people or these groups do not need supported. Right. It's just, it shouldn't be the focus.
Yes.
Yeah. If you go and you lost all the ag from your party, you lost, and there can be the crossover, but what I'm saying is like, there's a huge body of people there, right?
Yes.
What I'm trying to look at, I'm not trying to alienate anything right now. What I'm trying to say is you have to look at the broader picture, the big picture of what we're actually doing, okay? So if you said we're not going to work with any males, okay, you lost the focus, right? You just alienated half of the people, right? So the goal is to be, it sounds like you guys are trying to be as inclusive as possible, not just focus on a certain group of people.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where perhaps the focus needs to change a little bit.
Right. I think some people have felt like by us being inclusive, which is a good thing. I agree with that. But there's a point where it gets to actually end up being exclusive of people. And I think that's worth looking into, to be realistic with ourselves and be open and honest about that. And I want people to start feeling comfortable, whether I become vice chair or not. And maybe some people will have very different viewpoints of me coming out about this, but I will always promote and support, encourage people to say how they feel and talk about these things, because the further and the more that we get away from it and choose not to talk about it, it's going to be a harder issue later on. Yep. And I think we're kind of headed down that path right now.
The interesting part is this is not a problem necessarily that's unique to the Democratic Party. On the Republican side, for better or for worse, let's just touch the subject of abortion. Let's go through all the controversial subjects. Okay. There's a bill that was presented that would abolish abortion essentially in North Dakota. That was the theory behind it. It would criminalize abortion. Right. And that's a very strong topic. You have very strong pro-life people that are like, I don't know about this. I don't know if this helps. All right. So there's a lot of conversation that hinges around this topic, right? Mm-hmm. But it shows a massive grouping there of people that are, well, I'm not on the Republican side. I'm not that far in this, right. or I feel like that would be hurting, or whatever their reason is. It just shows this massive spray here of this massive grouping of people. And so on the same thing is happening as naturally as it should on the Democratic side, where your view on abortion, and I'm not wanting to speak for you, but from conversations that we've had and conversations we've had with others, is not as far left as others people's view on abortion.
Right. That's correct.
But shouldn't there be a possible way for you to still be like, can somebody that says I'm against abortion be in the Democratic Party?
Absolutely. I believe that they should be. We are hurting. We talk so much about we need to gain the moderate votes, right? Mm-hmm. The Democrats want to basically pull in moderate Republicans and vice versa. But what we're doing right now is the complete opposite. We're losing that interest from the moderates or the independents. And that's my biggest fear and my biggest frustration is that we're not going to secure that and be successful in that when we continue to say, okay, well, this Democrat is anti-abortion, so we're going to out her, or this guy is not as strong leaning on LGBTQ issues, we're going to shut him out. And that's the problem. A healthy democracy and healthy parties come from different ideas and perspectives, how we grow. And I feel like that's just not really happening right now.
Okay, so let me ask this question then. What, in your viewpoint, what should be the core, like, because eventually you have to say, all right, you're not a Democrat or you're not a Republican, right? Eventually it's obvious. But what is that? What is that defining moment? Is it the social issues, which it feels like it is right now, where you don't stand in the same area that we do on abortion, or you don't stand in the same area that we do on LGBTQ issues, so you're not a Democrat, okay? Right. Or is it the views on unions and views on green energy and views on, and I use green energy, we haven't talked about it, but views on things like that are maybe more, what is the core thing of the Democratic Party that says this is what helps show that you're probably more Democratic, or this, if you're not in this area, you're probably not? Is it those social issues, or is it something more?
I think it's very subjective though. There's so many strong views on everyone's values, right? So someone might say, you know what, that was the cherry on top. You're against, the climate stuff, or, and then another person could say, nope, it's, the abortion stance.
Exactly.
It's very tricky, and it's unfortunate that it is that way.
But that's kind of what I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
Is right now it feels cut and dry.
Yeah, it is.
It feels like if I'm against abortion, there will not be a candidate that I could find in the Democratic Party that I could consider supporting.
I think if we continue to have these conversations and people come out of the woodwork, I think there probably would be more. Yeah. But I think, and on both sides, again, this is not just a Democratic issue, but I think there's a lot of people, like you had mentioned, and you hit it right on the nail, is that we are much more moderate in a room together than we want to admit. Right. And I think if we took that time to, and that's why I feel very strongly and passionate about creating and maintaining good relationships with Republicans, because I want to understand their viewpoints. And once they get to know me, they think, wow, we actually agree on quite a few things. And I bet they would find that with even maybe someone that's maybe further left than I am on certain things. You just never know. Yep. But if we continue to isolate ourselves and isolate people and your ideas, then we're always going to be, up against that divide. Yeah.
And a topic we never even talked about that is also a little bit plays into that is views on spending. Yeah. Obviously there's wide swath, and that's not the full focus of what we're talking about, but I think it's interesting to actually look at those issues and be like, just because you believe in more, for some people, you said it best, honestly, for some people, if you're more socialistic in your spending, not going to have anything to do with that. Right. But they're fine with abortion, but not the, right. And so that's what puts them into the different parties, which is an interesting thing. All right. So I think we kind of hashed that part out really well. I think where I want to focus more is like, if right now, the Democratic Party is respectfully, I don't mean this demeaning,
Sure.
is a small player in North Dakota.
Right. Absolutely.
How do you feel like they can change that? The party can change that. And I know it's part of what we talked about today, but what's the
Right.
message to North Dakotans and to the Democratic Party of how to get the Democratic Party where by the end of this decade or beginning to middle of next decade, that suddenly there's more balance. It's not going to happen in one cycle. It's going to
Right.
have to be some momentum that's built. But how does that change begin to happen?
I think we need to look very closely to how we align with the DNC. Now that's kind of a strong statement to make, but I kind of feel like if we are very concerned about what the DNC does and we try and follow and toe, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, when was the last time someone from the DNC was in North Dakota? We're a flyover state. And we put so much time and energy into kind of appeasing the party to an extent when Democrats in Minnesota or Georgia, Kentucky, they're all going to have different, because North Dakota is unique. We are unique. And we need people to understand the challenges that we do have and take time to be here and experience that. But I think the same thing goes for our districts and for our local Democrats. We need to get out into the community. We need to start. I think we kind of get into our little like nits, and we don't go outside of that.
Yep.
And I don't know what we're trying to protect with that. And I think we get comfortable with being comfortable.
Right.
And we need to kind of get outside of our boundaries. I mean, what is there really to lose here? If we do something drastically different, what is there to lose? And I feel like that holds us back from progressing and actually maybe seeing changes in these elections. But look at the military bases we have in North Dakota. Where are we connecting with the military? Yeah. I don't see hardly enough of that.
Right. That's a great point right there.
It's like we have, and despite what a lot of people think, because there is that kind of generalization that if you're military, you're Republican, which is not true.
That's an old thought.
It is. But there's a lot of support that we could gain from there as well. And I just feel like there's a lot of lack of reaching out to different populations. And I feel like if we would make that a priority, I think we would make some headway. I think we would see some changes. But until we're willing to get uncomfortable and come to, some of the realities of where we're at, nothing's going to change. And I'm kind of a very proactive person. It's hard for me to sit back and to, I don't fit the mold and I don't intend to. And I don't want other people to feel like they have to in order to be accepted by the Democrat Party. There's
something that I read recently and something that you shared. It's just a concept in politics. I think in general, that's the idea of the big tent, right?
Yes.
That's not, the Republican Party will try to say that it's their idea in North Dakota, but it's not true. It's just a concept that's used across politics. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about is like, make sure, don't just say we have a big tent. Make sure all the doors of the tent are open. You don't have to walk to one door to get into our big tent,
Right.
Make sure that's actually allowing people to feel comfortable from wherever their views are.
Right. And I mean, I'm going to kind of piggyback on that a little bit here for a minute. I experienced that firsthand running as a candidate in District 38.
Okay.
Everyone knew I was a moderate Democrat that was running, and that was very difficult for some people to accept.
Right.
And that right there, I think, is also where we're going to lose potential great candidates because we're too stuck on, where are you at on this topic and where are you at with this? And I see that being a problem because we have people who are kind of afraid to run because they see what kind of happened with my campaign or what happened with other people. And they said, well, I don't want to not be supported if I run.
Right.
And if we start to be a little bit more open and talk about these things, I think more people would maybe step up and run. I don't know.
See, what you're saying makes a lot of sense if people can realize it. And that is, after our first podcast that we ever did together, we were doing just candidate interviews. And I went away from it and I'm like, man, I didn't ask very good questions because I'm not quite sure like what makes her a Democrat versus what makes her a Republican.
Right.
Okay. And that's because it's the moderate deal. And maybe you might not like me saying that.
It's okay.
But my point with that is if you want to affect change, then the people that is elected needs to reflect the people from the district they're coming from.
Right.
Not from what you've already said, the Democratic National Party, or the potentially, and I'm not trying to call them out, but potentially a state party that is located in a different area, right? Yes. That is going to reflect views differently, because that's going to happen. But the fact of the matter is, your Democrat, just like it happens on the Republican side, is going to look different in Dickinson versus how it looks in Grand Forks or wherever else, right? Yep. And for the Republicans, we've had conversations where, yeah, the Republicans that are in the Fargo area, sure, they're not going to be your ultra conservative abolishing abortion Republicans, because they're in a battle that Western North Dakota doesn't know about.
Yes.
And so and for better or for worse, that's the way that politics works. The people have to represent in some way the people that they're, and that feels like that part is probably a key part that's lost in the whole conversation.
Yeah, that was the disconnect. Absolutely. 100%. And speaking of, one thing that I would kind of look forward to is I would love to see a chair or a vice chair for the state party out on the western side of North Dakota.
Yeah.
I really, really do. And I think that's going to be key to kind of mending some of those relationships, because there are people who are really frustrated with the state party.
Yeah.
And you have to think, okay, well, why are they upset? Well, we're on the western side. We don't feel like we have the representation. We don't have, events out here because it's too far away, right? Which is why I kind of been thinking about, I would love to see headquarters out of Fargo. Yeah. I would like to see it back in Bismarck, because now the playing field is even. Right. We can make those trips. We can, and people are going to feel like they're recognized and they're remembered. It's not we go visit District 2 when reorgs come up. Yeah. That's, right. And that is super meaningful. I think people kind of forget what it actually, the value behind someone making that effort to go out there, to be there, to see them, to see their city, see the landscape. And they just really, really appreciate that. And I think we've lost that right now. Yeah. And now, will that ever happen? I don't know. That's definitely something I'm willing to bring up and discuss and see if we could. I think they just moved pretty recently to Fargo, so they may not be, might not be too keen about that. But I think it is something that we do need to consider. Right. No, for sure.
I will say this: when somebody knocks on your door, and that's one example, but when you begin to have that one-on-one conversation, they're a Democrat, they're this, they're that, they're whatever. And then you go, oh, they're a human. That's what they are. Yeah. And they also can connect, and they also have good ideas, and and you begin to find common ground. Then you can actually make a well-informed decision, right, rather than whatever somebody's perception of, and that goes for either side of the party. Right. It's been a great conversation. I think we've covered the topic well, but I do want to leave it open here at the end, just in case if there's something that we've missed that you kind of want to make sure is included, or if there's just a closing message that you have.
I guess my closing message would be to just encourage everybody, whether you're Democrat or Republican, to take some time to self-reflect, and to remember that right now, I think we all need to take a minute to look in the mirror before we look in the microscope at other people. That's good. And if you have things that have been on your mind and on your heart, talk to your leadership about it. And I would love to see more people speak out and not feel afraid to do that, because I think it's very telling about how people react. I think that's the problem, is we're so probably more reactive than we are being proactive about a lot of things. Yeah. And I just would encourage everyone to do that, because if we think it's hard to have these conversations now, I think things are just going to get worse. And just find that voice in you and do what you can. Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for watching this episode of The Conversation here at The Dakotan. Be sure to like and subscribe, become part of the Dakotan community. If you do that, we'll continue having great conversations just like this, helping create conversation in North Dakota. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.